I'm Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. Thank you for joining me for this very brief webinar about caregiving programs, courses, on-site presentations, video conferences, and more. My journey as a caregiver began more than 40 years ago with my mother, who back at that time knew nothing about what we know today about health, wellness, and caregiving. My mother smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. She didn't exercise. She was overweight. She had a poor diet. The only thing that she didn't do was drink because her sister was an alcoholic. My mom died at the age of 69 from multiple chronic diseases: heart disease, mini stroke. She had bladder cancer and passed away at a very, very young age. In addition to the loss of my mother, I lost my sister when I was 17 years old. She was 29. She was killed in a car accident. My father passed away about 4 years after my mother and my oldest brother. He came home from my father's funeral, became so ill, was diagnosed with leukemia, and died about a year later. All of those family changes sought me to seek out the positive in all of these losses. I have been so blessed to be a caregiving expert. For the past 25 years, I have worked with caregivers, aging adults, disabled adults, to help manage care and to navigate the healthcare system, which is very challenging for family caregivers. As a medical and a financial power of attorney for my clients, I was in the role that most adult children find themselves in today. I made healthcare and financial decisions for my clients, and I was a professional fiduciary. What that means is that I had a legal responsibility that I took very seriously to manage the health and well-being of my clients. I was also a court-appointed guardian for individuals who could not make decisions for themselves, individuals who had Alzheimer's, dementia, other types of brain injuries. I did that for a long period of time. I was involved in court hearings. I testified on behalf of my clients in court, and I very fully understand the situations that caregivers and older adults go through today that can be very challenging and be quite of a struggle. In this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about on-site and video conferencing presentations, caregiving programs for caregivers and for older adults, and why all of this is beneficial. Let's talk about the effects of caregiving and how far-reaching these effects are. If you look at the list on this slide, you will see that caregiving affects every part of our life. It affects family relationships from the perspective of, if we have moved away from our parents' home and we come back, we are developing a new relationship with our elderly parents, with our brothers and sisters, with other people in the family who may not agree with what we are doing as a caregiver. It also affects career. Working caregivers struggle to balance work, caring for their own families, raising their children, maybe going to school, trying to advance in a career, trying to work harder, and trying to care for elderly parents. All of this is very stressful, as you might imagine. There's also the income and the financial planning aspects of caregiving. The statistics show that today, on average, family caregivers can spend anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000 a year paying for care for elderly parents. What then happens to the caregiver and their ability to save for retirement or to save to pay for college for their young children? The financial aspects of caregiving, not only for the costs of caregiving today for elderly parents, but for the long-term effects of family caregivers to save for their own retirement and their own care, very difficult. And it's often a subject that family members find it difficult to talk about, because saying that we don't have enough money for care doesn't make anyone feel good. Then we have the physical and the emotional effects on the health of caregivers. This is a topic that is very undiscussed. The statistics show that many caregivers, about 30%, actually become so sick and pass away before the person for whom they are caregiving. This is why the combination of health and wellness programs and talking about caregiving in the workplace is so important. Many times the idea of health and wellness isn't relevant. It's not relevant because we see health declines being so many years into the future. But when we are that family caregiver and the health and well-being of our elderly parents smacks us in the face, we can't do anything but pay attention because we see it. Also, retirement and needing care is another subject that families don't talk about many times until an adult child becomes a caregiver for an elderly parent. And taking another step forward, the caregiver needs a plan for himself, for herself, especially women. The statistics show that men usually pass away before spouses. But then what happens when that sick spouse passes away and the healthy spouse remains, but all of the money in the family was dedicated to the care of the sick spouse? When that healthy spouse no longer has the retirement benefits of the spouse that passed away, when all of the family money is gone, how does that spouse survive? Who cares for them? And how do they get the care that they deserve after dedicating years of raising children, caring for elderly parents, and caring for a spouse? Let's talk about the fact that only another caregiver understands. And this was true in my family situation and actually in my work situation. My parents passed away, as you know, more than 25 years ago. At the time that my mother passed away, I had a wonderful, wonderful boss. His name was David. So understanding, so compassionate, told me to go home for that week that my mother passed away to take care of everything that I needed to take care of and come back and be ready to go back to work. And even after that, he was still compassionate. 4 years later, totally different boss. This boss's name was Jane. Jane had no family experience with death, with caregiving, with losses. She pressured me to take a promotion, to work harder, to do all of these things. And I struggled because I was grieving the loss in a 4-year period of my mother, my father, and my oldest brother. She had no idea what I was going through. And this is the challenge in workplaces, in life. Many caregivers feel like other people don't understand. And it's almost impossible to understand until you are that caregiver, until you have had to bathe an elderly parent, change a Depends, show up at midnight and stay at the emergency room all night, when you are worrying about your parents, when you are worried that that next phone call is going to be bad news. This is the life of a caregiver. And many times, take it a step further, caregivers are judged. People will say, oh, it can't be that bad caring for an elderly parent. Or, well, that's your responsibility. Until that person who says that becomes a caregiver, they have no idea how insensitive they might have been. And the workplace, too, can be pretty insensitive to caregivers. Caregivers suffer from a lot of emotional aspects. That emotional aspect of watching the health of a loved one decline and feeling helpless or hopeless to do anything about it, especially when the healthcare system can be uncaring, when it can deny care or treatment for elderly parents just because they're old. Other issues are family disagreements about care. Disagreements from mom or dad. Disagreements from a brother or sister who may not be participating in care, who may leave everything to that primary caregiver, who is usually a daughter, to take on all the responsibilities. And the challenge is many family caregivers don't feel comfortable asking other family members for help. So what happens? Their health and their well-being suffer. Then there are concerns about money and tasks, and I call these medical care tasks. A lot of the tasks that caregivers are doing today used to be done in hospitals and in nursing homes. Caregivers today, taking blood pressures, blood sugars, giving insulin, changing ostomy bags, using lifts. The list goes on and on. Many caregivers have no training. They feel very unprepared for all of these care situations that arise because they accepted that role of being a caregiver. Navigating the care system is another issue. Healthcare providers speak in their own language. They have policies and procedures, and family caregivers often don't understand this terminology. What if I said to you, well, is your parent having difficulties with ADLs? Have they had a UTI lately? What about a TIA? Would you know what I was talking about? This is the experience of many family caregivers. The goals of caregiving programs are so many when the programs are relatable, when they are given in a manner that caregivers can understand. Motivation is usually the basis for change in all aspects of our life. In health and wellness and caregiving programs, we need a reason to want to make that change. In caregiving, becoming aware of the issues that happen today, the issues that can potentially happen a year from now, 5 years from now, make caregiving relevant. And they grab our attention, especially if our parents are starting to need care and we're starting to notice how that is affecting our lives. The beginning of making caregiving programs relevant for anybody, for people in all walks of life, is to talk about what happens as we age and talk about the real consequences and give real situations of what happens when elderly parents need care and relate that to the life of the caregiver today and how many times all the diagnoses that we see in our elderly parents, they were present 10 years before, 20 years before, 30 years before, but not to the point that they caused daily issues with care. The other benefit of caregiving programs is that they reduce the burden and the worry of what are we going to do when this gets worse? How are we going to manage when our elderly parents need more care? Is there money? Do we know what our parents want? Are we going to have to argue with the healthcare system? Are we prepared? So many questions. Education for caregivers is for employees. It is for your clients. It is for prospects. It is for people in the community. We all are going to have caregiving touch part of our life sooner, if not later. It's inevitable. The reality is we don't get out of life alive. We don't want to talk about the fact that we are going to die. We don't want to talk about the fact that elderly parents will die or that someday we will become diagnosed with a chronic illness like high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and we too will suffer the effects of needing care from loved ones. Caregiving programs are applicable to people in all walks of life, to social service and healthcare organizations, financial advisors, and planners. You benefit from caregiving programs as well as your clients who have no reason why they should look at health insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, blended plans, why they should save for retirement until they learn that Medicare doesn't pay for everything. Medicare doesn't pay for the care that you need when you're older. It pays for health care, but not everything else. Elder law attorneys, probate attorneys, estate planning attorneys. Because I was the financial and medical power of attorney, because I was that professional fiduciary who was the guardian, and in some cases, the conservator. I know what situations family members go through. I know what badly drafted documents are. I know how they affect the ability of that person in the family or a professional fiduciary to do their job. I've testified in court for hours on behalf of my clients. I've helped attorneys examine documents and win for their clients because I know what happens in caregiving situations, and even more, I know what questions should be asked. Consumer products companies. I have written articles. I have consulted for consumer products companies that sell products and services to the elderly. And also educational institutions. As you'll see on my website, I develop online courses for caregivers. I help people learn about caregiving, about the aspects of caregiving, working with the healthcare system and every aspect of life that is involved. Caregiving programs are relevant. I make them relatable because I talk in the language that caregivers understand. I translate all of the medical speak to simple processes. In these caregiving programs, I use many of the tools and processes that I used in managing care for my clients for over 20 years. I use the tools and training materials that I used to train caregivers who worked in my company, to train care managers who worked in my company. Family caregivers who want to make situations better, who want to learn, who want systems and processes to learn how to make care better for their elderly parents and themselves, benefit from these programs. I do on-site programs where I come to corporations, I come to locations and I speak. I do video conferencing presentations that are broadcast quality or are that are web conferencing quality. I have online programs. I do question and answer webinars. The programs are suited to you and to your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, whether it is within a company, within your employees, whether it is internal training, whether you have financial advisors, whether you have attorneys, whether you have healthcare workers that would benefit from this information, and whether you are a consumer organization, like a disease-specific organization, a healthcare organization with social workers or CNAs. All of this information is beneficial and relatable. I'm Pamela D. Wilson. You can contact me through my website. There is a contact form there. You can fill out information. I'm happy to talk to you about these programs and presentations. You can also just pick up the phone and call me at 303-810-1816. Thank you for joining me for this very brief webinar about caregiving programs, all the options that are available. I look forward to helping you, your company, your clients, your prospects. I'll see you soon in another webinar.